Welcome to The Explainer. I'm genuinely thrilled you're joining us today. We are going to unpack a fascinating, highly influential, and undeniably polarizing framework. We're looking at Jack Donovan's 2012 book, The Way of Men. Now, this text has sparked some fierce debate across the internet and in various cultural circles, mostly because it challenges pretty much everything we're currently taught about gender. Whether you're entirely new to this text or you've seen it debated online, our goal today is to give you a completely objective, structured breakdown of its core arguments. We're going to map out exactly what Donovan is saying about evolutionary psychology and the concept of manhood.
Okay, let's dive into this with the most fundamental question possible. What exactly is masculinity? Today, if you ask that question, you get a really confusing cacophony of answers, right? Advertisers tell you it's something you can buy, like a certain truck or a rugged brand of watch. Modern institutions often define it through obedience and docility. Others say it's entirely a social construct, a performance we put on, or even that it's inherently toxic and needs to be deconstructed. But Donovan cuts right through that modern noise with a stark, uncompromising answer. He argues that masculinity isn't a social construct at all. Instead, it's a primal, biological reality shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution.
So we'll be taking a structured journey through this material today in 5 distinct parts. 1. The primal question. 2. The survival gang. 3. The 4 tactical virtues. 4. The modern crisis. And finally 5. Legacy and reception.
Let's start with Section 1, the primal question. The core idea here is that masculinity is a biological reality driven by natural selection.
Which brings us right to Section 2, the survival gang.
The foundation of this entire explainer rests on understanding that specific evolutionary environment. To understand men today, Donovan argues, we really have to strip away all our modern conveniences and look at the environments that actually shaped human DNA. For the vast majority of human history, masculinity wasn't forged in boardrooms or universities or quiet suburban neighborhoods. For roughly 300,000 years, early human survival depended entirely on small, embattled groups of men struggling to survive against apex predators, brutal elements, and rival groups. It was a completely unforgiving environment where natural selection favored highly specific, aggressive, and protective characteristics. Now compare that to the dawn of civilization, which only happened about 10,000 years ago, in our modern society, which is barely a blip on the timeline of human history. The biological traits selected over those hundreds of thousands of years don't just magically disappear just because we invented grocery stores, climate control, and the internet.
The central thesis of the book is actually quite stark. To quote directly, "The way of men is about being a man within a group of men." The author views masculinity as fundamentally social. It is not an individual, isolated quality. Think about it. A man stranded alone on a desert island doesn't really need masculinity in this specific sense. Rather, masculinity is defined entirely by what men need and demand from each other within a peer group to ensure their mutual survival.
This intense group dynamic leads to a critical distinction. Donovan sharply contrasts the gang with the club. A club is a casual social group. Maybe you play recreational softball together on weekends, or you meet up online to play video games. If you quit, or if someone isn't very good, nothing really happens. But a gang, in this primal evolutionary sense, is a strict survival unit. The stakes are literally life and death. In the primal gang, there is zero tolerance for incompetence, laziness, or cowardice. Because if one man fails to do his part, the perimeter is breached, the hunt fails, and the whole group could die.
Moving on to Section 3. The 4 tactical virtues. This life-or-death environment is exactly what forged what he calls the tactical virtues. And it is absolutely vital to note here that the text frames these virtues as amoral survival tools, not traditional moral imperatives. In this framework, being a good man doesn't mean being a morally good person by modern civilized standards. It doesn't mean being kind, generous, egalitarian, or peaceful. It means being good at being a man. It means being highly effective at keeping your group alive against outside threats. A man could possess all these virtues and still be considered a bad person by today's ethical standards, but in the primal gang, raw effectiveness was literally all that mattered.
The first of these 4 virtues is strength. Donovan presents strength as the absolute bedrock. Physically, mentally, and emotionally, it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Why? Well, because in a primal survival gang, a weak man is a massive liability. If you lack physical capacity, you can't hunt large game, you can't carry the heavy burdens required to move camp, and most importantly, you simply cannot fight off rival tribes or predators. Exerting physical force was a daily requirement, so every other virtue ultimately relies on this basic capability.
Next up is courage. Now, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the conscious willingness to act despite it. It is the virtue that bridges intention and action. In a highly dangerous world, a man who won't take risks or sacrifice his own safety for the collective benefit of the group makes everyone else completely vulnerable. It's the drive that makes a man stand the line when the perimeter is attacked, risking his own life so that the tribe can endure.
The third virtue is mastery. This builds directly on the idea that no one in a survival situation gets a free ride. Every single man had to contribute a tangible, specialized skill to the group. This could mean becoming an expert tracker, a master at building weapons, a strategist, or a fierce close-quarters fighter. Mastery is what makes a man undeniably useful and ensures he isn't just a dependent passenger relying on the hard work and protection of the rest of the group. Finally, we have honor. So the crucial point is that honor, in this evolutionary context, isn't an abstract inner moral compass. It's your external reputation among your peers. It's the social glue holding the gang together. When you have a cultivated reputation for strength, courage, and mastery, you possess honor. If you fail to uphold those traits, you lose the respect of the group, which creates a very real, very unforgiving system of accountability. Together, strength, courage, mastery, and honor form a complete, interdependent survival framework where each trait reinforces the others to keep the gang alive.
Let's get into Section 4, the modern crisis.
So if we are biologically wired for these intense, survival-based virtues, what happens when we live in the 21st century? The source material argues there is a massive structural clash between our primal biology and modern society. Civilization systematically demands docility, obedience, and safety. It actively, legally, and socially punishes physical aggression and extreme risk-taking. But primal existence demanded the exact opposite, right? It demanded struggle, competition, and constant physical risk. The book essentially argues that men are hardware wired for an ancient software program that just no longer exists, leaving a huge portion of the population deeply frustrated and entirely out of place.
To illustrate how men react to this immense friction, the book outlines several psychological archetypes. Take a look at archetypes like the gang member or the tribal leader. These are active and embodied. They manage to channel those primal drives into their actual lives, often through high-risk professions, martial arts, or building highly competitive businesses. On the flip side, civilization often produces the civilized man, who is compliant and passive, having successfully suppressed his nature to fit in. But the most alarming archetype for modern society is the disengaged man, the man who simply gives up entirely because he finds absolutely no acceptable outlet for his primal drives.
And according to the source material, this disengaged man archetype isn't just an abstract theory. It's manifesting in real-world statistics right now. We see symptoms of this crisis everywhere. Large numbers of men are dropping out of the workforce, retreating into video games, and seeking endless digital escapism. Without a tangible survival purpose or a bonded tribe to belong to, many men are experiencing a profound crisis of meaning. They feel totally adrift. They're desperately searching for a tribal identity and a sense of shared, dangerous purpose that safe, modern civilization has largely erased from daily life.
And finally, Section 5, Legacy and Reception.
Whether you agree with Donovan's evolutionary lens or completely reject it, the cultural footprint of this book is undeniable, and we really need to look at why it has struck such a nerve. The facts of its reach are actually quite staggering. It's sold well over 100,000 copies and has been translated globally. It has become a foundational, almost mandatory text in various online spaces focusing on men's issues, and it's found a highly receptive, deeply devoted audience in military, law enforcement, and martial arts communities. Understanding this framework is absolutely essential if you want to comprehensively understand contemporary cultural conversations about gender and masculinity.
But of course, it is deeply polarizing, and we have to look impartially at both sides to get the full picture. Those who praise the book applaud its direct, uncompromising style. They note that it offers a deeply resonant, timeless evolutionary lens that finally explains male behavior in a way that modern sociology often fails to capture for them. Critics, however, argue just as strongly that the framework completely ignores the emotional, relational, and intellectual diversity of men throughout history. They claim it's overly focused on rigid traditional stereotypes and physical dominance at the expense of recognizing the psychological complexity and adaptability of the human species.
Which leaves us with a final, truly provocative question to ponder. Is masculinity an inescapable evolutionary imperative tied forever to the harsh realities of the survival gang? Or is it something that can dynamically adapt and evolve to meet the safety and complex demands of a civilized world? It's a massive question where biology, sociology, and culture all violently collide. I hope this breakdown helped you understand the stark arguments of the way of men, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring these evolutionary and sociological concepts on your own. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.